use the services, I had to say to the family, don't come near me, right? No hugs, stay within. They're like, really? You don't understand. This is family. So you don't.
I think we're live now.
Virus,
You gentlemen are live, and lady, thank you. Yes. But that was a great conversation. So
yeah,
I'm very sorry for your loss, Dr. Wilson.
Sure.
But welcome. So excited to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the star-studded discussion. You know, I feel a little bit like on that Sesame Street segment where it's one of these things is not like the other. You know, which one of these people does not lead a nationally renowned institution in the state of Maryland? That would be me. I'm so honored and thrilled to have you all on today. So thank you for taking the time. I'm Delegate Brooke Learman, and I represent, along with my teammates, Senator Bill Ferguson and Delegates Robin Lewis and Luke Klippinger, the 46th district in Baltimore City, although of course we work at the state level to pass and implement policies around the state. And you know, I'm delighted to welcome everybody who's watching today. This is my 30th briefing with Brooke since the pandemic began and the General Assembly session ended early on March 18th. You know, when I first came home, I heard from many people that they felt they needed more information. And I really believe that being an elected official is about much more than passing legislation. It's about connecting people with the resources that they need, driving discussions about important topics, and advocating for change in multiple ways, including through discussions like this one. So I'm thrilled to have all of you on today to talk with us about the future of higher education. I'm just gonna talk for 30 seconds, and then I'm gonna turn it over to all of you because no one wants to hear from me. They're here to hear from you. But I mention this because higher ed, you know, I haven't had a conversation since the pandemic started that didn't touch on education. And this is the third briefing that I've done on education this month. We heard from Dr. Sanalisis and Dr. John King. We heard from our union presidents, and now we are turning to the topic of higher education. And because there's so much to talk about. And you all have different perspectives, you have different institutions, but you're facing some very similar challenges, some different challenges. And, you know, as we were just saying, people are talking about losing loved ones to the pandemic. This is not going away anytime soon, unfortunately. And as with everything else COVID related, we have to put public health and safety first. And we know that college campuses, unfortunately, can be a hotbed for this extremely contagious virus. There's just a New York Times report recently that 6,300 coronavirus cases have been linked to US colleges. Maryland is really blessed to have some amazing, prestigious higher learning institutions. So I'm excited to have you all here today to talk. So I'm gonna give brief bios on you because I could speak for about an hour about each of you and your accomplishments, but I'd rather have you speak than have me speak about you. So I'm gonna give brief bios about each of you and then I'm gonna turn it over. So Dr. Jay Perman became the 5th Chancellor of the University System of Maryland in January 2020. Prior to this appointment, Dr. Perman, a pediatric gastroenterologist, served as president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore for nearly a decade. As Chancellor, Dr. Perman is committed to advancing higher education affordability for all students in Maryland. And most importantly, he is a District 46 resident. Dr. Freeman Hrabowski has served as the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County since 1992. His research and publications focus on science and math education with special emphasis on minority participation and performance. He chaired the National Academies Committee that produced the 2011 report, Expanding Underrepresented Minority Participation, America's Science and Technology Talent at the Crossroads, and he was named in 2012 by President Obama to chair the Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans. He also has a District 46 connection in that UMBC has adopted one of our great public schools, Lakeland Elementary and Middle School, and helps run a phenomenal science, technology, engineering, and arts and math program, a STEAM program there, a STEAM center. So Dr. Kim Schatzel began leading Towson University as its 14th president in January 2016. Her 8 presidential priorities build on Towson's momentum as Maryland's second largest and fastest growing university, as well as the largest public university in Greater Baltimore. Her contributions to and leadership in Maryland have been recognized by the Daily Record, Most Influential Marylanders, and as a top 100 woman. And I will note that one of the best interns I have had in Annapolis was a freshman at Towson. So we all miss Lewis and love him.
He's great.
He was a great intern. And David Wilson, Dr. David Wilson is the 10th president of Morgan State University. He's a long record of accomplishment and more than 30 years of experience in higher education administration. He holds 4 academic degrees, a BS in political science, an MS in education from Tuskegee University, and an educational master's in educational planning and administration from Harvard, and in administration planning and social policy. His educational philosophy is to put students' experience first. He's a strong consensus builder and a strong believer in transparency of process. I will note that we always have our city delegation briefings at Morgan State University. And so I miss those briefings. Now they've moved on to Zoom, and I look forward to getting back to your beautiful campus and your building soon. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Perman now to start us off with an overview of some of the challenges facing the system and decisions that are being made at the system-wide level in this summer. Dr. Perman, take us away.
Delegate Lehrman, terrific to be here. Thanks for assembling a wonderful team of colleagues, probably more importantly, friends for this webinar. Kim, Freeman, David, always great to see you. To everyone joining in, my friends and neighbors, because as Delegate Lehrman pointed out, I am a proud constituent of hers. I do consider it a privilege to share with you how and why we're making some tough decisions. To say that our circumstances in higher education are unprecedented is a cliche, but it's also true. There's not one aspect of our academic operations that's been untouched by this pandemic. So we are literally wading into uncharted waters. And what that begets is, as you've all seen, countless essays on how universities should be operating in these times. And seemingly, and this is unscientific, half of the essays promoting one way of doing things and the other half absolutely contradicting them. The most immediate issue, of course, is how universities should approach this fall semester. That's the immediate future. And it's often oversimplified into remote instruction versus in-person instruction. Now for us, we've been clear that the University System of Maryland will resume some in-person instruction this fall. But returning to campus doesn't mean in-person all the time. Right now, we think we'll have less than half of our total student population actually on campus this fall. So returning to campus doesn't mean everyone comes back, not by a long shot. The majority of our classes won't be taught in a traditional face-to-face format. Some will be remote or online only. Some will be a hybrid with face-to-face sessions supplementing online work. For us, a blended model combining in-person and remote learning is frankly high cost and high effort. It's not an easy out. It doesn't save us money or time or planning. So why are we doing it? Well, we're doing it because some of our teaching does require in-person interaction, in-person demonstration, in-person performance, in-person observation. An online-only version of these courses simply would not meet our students' needs. Speaking for myself, I'm continuing to teach health science students remotely and online using telemedicine. But you know, to be a doctor or a nurse or a dancer, by the way, I do not teach dancing, there must be some in-person work. Plus, college campuses have survived as long as they have because they have inherent value. There's value in our libraries, our labs, our simulation centers, our performing arts spaces, the things that cannot be replicated in a virtual environment. So we chose a blended approach because we have students who need the campus environment, the connection, the camaraderie, as much as they need our courses. Students in a variety of untenable situations, students with nowhere else to go, students who are unsafe or under financial stress, students who need the on-campus academic and emotional support that helps them stay in school and succeed. I think that this support is especially vital to low-income and first-generation students. And yes, among them, students of color, the very students we fear losing most if we simply pivot to online-only education, and we cannot afford to lose them. It would be wrong. Oh. And you know, our USM colleague, Dr. Chuck White, president of Salisbury University, he talks about his students in more rural communities on the Eastern Shore not having reliable broadband access. The technology gap is real, and it's an everyday burden on students. I'm not arguing that we can't accomplish our educational mission writ large while we're apart. Look, we've spent months refining and sharing high quality faculty for the online environment, improving instructional design. And yet still, I know that fulfilling our mission is easier when we're all connected, when we don't have to squander the assets that we still have and are able to give. And frankly, becoming an educated person, in my view, means learning to effectively interact person to person with people. Now, all of that said, Delegate Lehrman and colleagues, friends, neighbors, I want you to believe that I'm not a stubborn man. If this effort isn't enough, if the spread of COVID presents challenges too tough to counter now or 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now, sure, we'll pivot to remote instruction. We have an exit ramp. With most of our courses remote ready, the transition this time around will be smoother than it was in the spring. We're working in close partnership with our state and local health departments. They'll monitor our campus closely together with us. We'll consult with them and with the system's own public health experts to identify the trigger for remote learning. We've got no pride around this, no incentive to salvage an in-person semester if the science tells us we shouldn't. We know that the virus has the last word in our plans. If it's not safe to return, if it becomes unsafe at any point, we'll transition to remote learning. We're identifying currently where we see problems in logistics, staffing, communication, and we are remedying them. So I have my expert colleagues with me, but that's where I see the future, in the immediate future, and I'll stop there and let my colleagues weigh in.
That's great. Thank you. No, that was a really helpful overview to help everybody understand the thinking of the system and where we are. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Abowski to talk a little bit about how he sees this going forward and UMBC's plans.
Sorry. Okay, can you hear me? Just 2 or 3 points. I'm delighted to have my colleagues here with me, and Delegate Lieberman, thank you for having us there. I think it's most important for the state and for our region here in Baltimore to appreciate that all of our campuses are focused on helping our students and their families to succeed, and that they're going through challenging times, whether it's financial challenges. All of us are working to figure out how we can be even more creative in using financial aid, especially because there are many families who've lost jobs, right? Number 2, there are people who are worried about online instruction. And so giving our colleagues as much support as they look at what we did in the spring with teaching and learning to improve. Going through additional professional development right now. And we are working with student leaders to make sure that we understand what students said. So listening to what our students are saying, very important. And then finally, and for me, most important, thinking about how we will learn from this experience. So we will continue to use technology in some ways. And I think what you're going to see, to the question you were asking us broadly, a hybrid approach. There will be opportunities for online instruction, online use of services, and at the same time, appreciating what we can do face to face. And so I want you to just think about how we are working to meet the needs of our students and their families and of our faculty and staff, because it's a scary time. And think this way, build community. We are supporting each other more than ever. And for Lakeland Elementary in your district, I was just on a Zoom because we've been having a math camp for them all, and they were amazing. These are kids who are going to be big time leaders in our society. Let me stop there.
It's a great school. I'm so are working with them. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to President Chatzel to tell us a little bit about what's going on with Towson. Of course, Towson educates a lot of our teachers who are also having, facing challenges in our public schools too. So thank you for being here. Oh, you're on mute. Hold on.
There you go. Great. Thank you. I want to just also, do a nod of the head to my colleagues. As Jay said, many of the presidents across the United States that we talk to are all kind of building the bridge while we're walking on it. But I can share the fact that being part of the USM has been incredibly beneficial for the presidents. And I know that we've worked very closely with other universities in the state because we're all trying to be able to identify best practices to put in place so that we can have a successful and safe fall. I think one of the things that I also want to emphasize is the fact that college and universities for undergraduate is a transformational event for them. It's a time when they get to be able to explore, they get to be able to determine next steps in their career, they get to meet individuals that they might not have met before based on where they're coming from. We have 23,000 students and 25% of them are first generation students. About almost 30% are Pell Grant eligible. So as Jay pointed out, these are students that have that are in a position where if they're not on campus and we can't give the wraparound support to them that they deserve to make them successful and to provide for that student's success, they could be disadvantaged. I can share with you the fact that I've talked to students that went back in the springtime and then went back to homes where there was one computer in the household with not very successful Wi-Fi. And they had 3 or 4 brothers and sisters that were also trying to do their homework online throughout the day with parents coming in and out. It is not conducive to the type of environment that we want to be able to provide to support the success of the students. So having them come back at a much reduced, lower density model is what we're doing, and to provide for the type of safety that we want on the campus with lower density, with mask on, with social distancing, with measuring the classrooms out where we're taking classes where there are typically 40 people in a class and now there's going to be 10. and that we're going to rotate them around and mixing it with remote education, I can assure you that we're going to provide an outstanding education to those students that are coming back in the fall. It will be different. Just as much of what we're experiencing is different than it was in the spring, but we're committed to be able to provide that excellent academic experience.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. And Dr. Wilson, I'm delighted to turn it over to you and talk a little bit about the challenges that Morgan as an institution is facing. Some of them are, very much pre-pandemic challenges because of inequities, but also, some of your students and what you're hearing as well.
Okay, Brooke, thank you very much. And certainly it's always a pleasure to talk about higher education and to talk about it with such a distinguished group of colleagues. Morgan State University is very excited to be a part of this conversation. So if I were to address the question that you posed to us, I would just, well, what are some of your challenges? And then what are you doing on the campus to address those challenges? And I'll try and be very succinct. So the way I see this at Morgan is that we really are confronting and have confronted, I think, since we initially closed the campus, about 4 challenges. And those challenges are, number one, safety and testing in terms of how we make sure that the campus is safe enough to mitigate the transmission of the virus. And then we have in place a robust testing program with some kind of regularity and some kind of monitoring to ensure that if indeed we have students to return, that we once again are mitigating the possibility that we could have major outbreaks. So that's a major challenge for us. The second is, in this climate, what is it that we need to be doing in order to address, you're not going to completely satisfy, but address the real anxieties, the real concerns of faculty, the real anxieties and concerns of staff, the real anxieties and concerns of students, but they go beyond the anxieties for the students. It is really related to what you heard from my 3 other colleagues. It is the students also have some major challenges around learning modalities. And for Morgan, just basically saying everything is going to be online, and that's the only way you're going to get instruction, is a non-starter unless COVID-19 were to say to us that is indeed the direction you want to go. And then the last is, much like we are seeing at Towson and UMBC, we have a significant % of our students that are also first-generation college-going students. Their parents have lost their jobs. They were struggling even before COVID-19. And so now, as we seek to bring them back and reopen the institution, how could we do that without raising the cost and indeed making it less costly for students to attend? So let me just kind of go back and briefly put a couple of sentences to each one of these. So given all of that, we, of course, over the last month and a half, have just been unrelenting in cleaning every nook and cranny on campus. We've gone out, we've hired a private company to come in and augment our incredible colleagues in our physical plant and the housekeeping department. They are some of the best colleagues I have had in my higher education experience. But we really are cleaning the campus with professional grade materials and the way you see in hospitals and the like. With regard to the testing piece, we have been arguing for, I guess, the last month or so with going back and forth with the Attorney General's office to say, look, I really need the authority as a campus president, to mandate testing. But of course, because of some kind of legal issues there, we were kind of told, well, no, you can't do it. But then today we heard that, yes, you can do it. So now we, of course, are going forward with that in mind, and we'll begin to implement that on our campus. So what we have decided to do, and I put out a campus-wide memo on this on yesterday, is also to embrace a hybrid, high flex model. So what that means, simply stated, is this. Every single class that will be offered at Morgan in the fall will be available online or remote via live streaming, every single one. We sent out a survey to our faculty because we wanted a faculty option. I did not want to say to any faculty at Morgan, you have to come back to campus to teach face-to-face. And so 75% of them said they were comfortable coming back to campus. I'm sorry, they were not comfortable coming back to campus, even though we had basically done all of the things I just indicated. 25% of them said, yes, we are comfortable coming back and teaching face-to-face. So for the 25% that will be returning to teach face-to-face, we have invested $5 million in retrofitting about 200 classrooms at Morgan. So they have cameras, and basically students can participate in those live stream lectures anywhere in the world. And so those lectures are going to be recorded and they will be made available via live stream. So that's how we get to the 100% of all courses being delivered in this modality. So for the students, and I had about 20 virtual town hall conversations. I think in total, perhaps about 8,000 or so voices participated in this from students, faculty, staff. So I have a really, really good sense of where the temperature of the campus is. And so the students there said, look, we have to have the option of returning to campus, even if we take all of our courses once we get to campus remotely. And it is because of some of the issues, I believe Kim addressed those. It's for food insecurity, home insecurity. It is the incredible digital divide that I'm almost embarrassed to say that I knew it existed. Trust me, I'm not in any way naive about this. But when we went online and I audited 2 online courses, I began to understand that our students who were away from campus, they were having some real issues with connectivity. They were having some real issues just simply with a laptop. And so they want to be back on campus because we have invested in the technology. We have the laboratories there. We have food pantry. We have all these kinds of things to provide them with the counseling, the emotional support they need, even if they are not able to take the class face-to-face. And so we are giving them that option. And then finally, like the other campuses, we have de-densified, if you will, the campus itself. We'll have somewhere around 800 to 900 single rooms on campus for students to live in. And also, we are making an effort not to bring more than 50% of our staff back, less than that, just enough to make sure that the needs of our students are ministered to. And of course, 75% of our faculty won't be back. So at the end of the day, that's sort of the way we are approaching the fall. And I have really, really been very, very clear to the university community that that's the way we are approaching it on July 30th.
Right.
Right? I have no idea if we're going to be in the same place August 10th.
Right. Understood. Understood. Yeah. Everything seems to be a bit of a moving target. Well, thank you. Those were all really helpful. There were a few questions that people submitted when they RSVP'd, and I'd love anybody who's interested in answering them. You can just jump in and we'll try to get through a few of them because some of them were really thoughtful. And several people have been talking about and had questions about how, what are the positives of this? Like, how can we learn from the experience? Are there ways to use online platforms to move away from semesters always, or to not feel as constrained by semesters, to do more year-long work? Are there any upsides to sort of embracing and learning about and having professors and students become more comfortable doing remote learning, given, we're sort of setting aside the digital divide, which we can't, I understand, actually set it aside. I actually had an earlier webinar on that. It's a huge issue. But if we could get students online, are there things that we can learn from this experience about online learning? Or aside from online learning, are there, this has been a learning experience, as Dr. Hrabowski said, are there lessons that we should take forward from this?
Sure. Let me start by saying that I'm interested in seeing all of us open our minds to the possibilities of technology as a way of enhancing the teaching and learning process. It's very easy to say, what a shame we're not in person, and so the education will not be as good. That is not necessarily the case. We're seeing more and more colleagues from the humanities to other areas who are saying we are focused on strengthening teaching and learning. My research focuses heavily on the small percentage of Americans of color and in general who succeed in science and math. Only about a third of those who start actually succeed, even among the highest achieving people. So it's not as if we're doing a great job in America right now in math and science, just in the classroom. What has been interesting is to see how we can strengthen teaching and learning online with a heavy emphasis on building community, among building the teaching skills. The University System of Maryland has projects that we're involved in involving work in laboratories, for example, and ways that we can use the technology to teach. Similarly, when looking at what we do in universities to help K through 12, as I'm looking at that math camp at Lakeland, I'm learning from the teachers there, things that they're learning that can be helpful to students beyond what we've normally done. So this is a time when we can change the way we do things. And when we go back to whatever normal will mean, I think we will see much more use of technology, the ability to have learning going on at different times, changing how we do semesters. I think all of those things are up in the air right now and are possibilities if we just open our minds and think differently.
Dr. Perman, yep, hold on, unmute. Do you want to unmute yourself, Dr. Perman? Were you going to hop in? Sorry, you're still muted.
Thank you.
Yep,
I was
there you
going to
go.
hop in, yes. To the piece of your question, Delegate Lehrman, related to what somebody asked about the traditional semester. And, I'm sitting here among experts related to this, but here's what I would say. In the graduate professional environment, becoming a nurse or becoming a pharmacist, we're increasingly moving not so much to focus on a block of time, but on demonstrating competency. And what I'm getting at, a great many people have said to me, couldn't that be applied at the undergraduate level too? That there are certain competencies that are attached to a particular subject matter, and it may take somebody a semester, it may take somebody a year, or any piece of that time. So maybe we need to think about getting out of our boxes a bit and looking at a different metric to say, you're done with this course, move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think that, of course, we at Morgan were offering about 15% of our courses before the pandemic, quote unquote, online. But we are a high touch, caring, nurturing, you belong here type university. And our students are expecting that from Morgan State University, and we expect to give them that. I think being in this environment, Brooke, I have come almost full circle because about 6 or 8 months ago, I was having a global conversation about online being transformational. That's the future of higher ed. I think it is perhaps more in that vein for graduate study. I am of the opinion, and my colleague may very well disagree with this statement, but college should be more than just whether you have a skill. You can get a skill anywhere. But it is about how you mature in that environment? You know, how you grapple with ideas? How do you understand gesticulations? You know, how do you get back to your residential hall at 2 o'clock in the morning and debate and discuss the great issues of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? I don't see anyone logging on to Zoom at 1:30 saying, oh, let's get together with 25 of our friends and have a big conversation about global warming or social unrest. This technology is great in some spaces, but I don't see how it will supplant significantly what the undergraduate experience in America has come to be, and how it is still the envy of the world.
Yeah, certainly. You know, I don't remember everything I learned at where I went to college, but I still maintain very important friendships and remember some of those late night conversations better than some of the lectures I attended. So absolutely, absolutely. There's also quite a few questions about sort of the leadership skills needed in order for higher education leaders and professors to be effective leading and be effective teachers in this new paradigm shift, and how those skills are being taught, or, you know, opportunities for professors or staff to learn to use, sort of switch their skills from an in-person setting to a virtual or remote setting. And I know UMBC, I happen to have friends who are professors there, so I know you've been providing a lot of that training.
Yes.
And, you know, what is going on? What is the philosophy? How are teachers learning to be prolific in Zoom?
Being open-minded. Being
Yes.
open-minded, number one. Number two, being willing to learn new things. And number three, I think what we can say about UMBC, but all of our campuses, is faculty care. Faculty and staff care. And so if I can look at you, even through Zoom, and show that authenticity, that I'm wanting to make sure you're grasping the concept, or you can let me know you're not getting it, then we've got the kind of interaction we need. Want you all to also remember, I love David's discussion of the undergraduate, the traditional age undergraduate. I would certainly agree. It's a wonderful education, liberal arts education, but half of the people in undergrad school in America are not the traditional ages. And so so as we think about it, we need the hybrid approach. For some, the wonderful residential experience, for others doing it this way. But what I'm seeing my colleagues do, staff members, as they're working to help people get jobs, working on counseling for people, discussing financial, is showing the caring. I mean, this is the good news. If we were only doing it by phone, it'd be one thing, but you can see people, and students can tell if you really care. If you care, it comes through, and they can tell if you can explain something with clarity. Right? So I'm saying we want to open our minds to the possibilities.
Yep.
You know, one of the things that you'll often hear about higher ed from people that aren't in it is the fact that, you know, higher ed kind of plods. They don't do a lot of change making. You know, they really are not trying to be innovative in terms of that. And I have to tell you, if you take a look at both the colleagues that are here as well as those that are across the country, I've never seen an industry that has turned on a dime to be able to continue providing outstanding education services in what we do in so many different scenarios, whether it be rural, city, graduate, undergraduate, professional schools, residential campuses, commuter campuses, online. So that's one of the things that I think has come out of this very, very strongly, is that higher ed and the faculty, staff, students, as well as the leaders in it, are really, really good change makers, and that they can, you know, if we've all used Pivot one time, we've used it 1,000 times in the last 6 months. And our ability to do that is providing for the fact that we're giving excellence to our students and to our communities. I completely agree with the fact that, you know, there's differences in terms of the demographics of the populations that we serve. So it's not a one size fits all, but it never has been. We've been able to provide the type of services for the students so that they are successful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That's interesting to hear, you know, about how quickly the universities are having to turn, and absolutely correct. So a question, Morgan, UMB, UMBC, and Towson have been model anchor institutions in the Baltimore area, very generously tapping into their human and financial resources to invest in and support the neighborhoods near their campuses that are often struggling. COVID now, of course, competes for those same resources. And I think, many of our listeners may be aware of the BPW actions from early July in cutting. And maybe Dr. Perman, you might want to talk a little bit about some of those budget cuts at some point, but there is a question in the chat: can universities sustain their anchor engagement at a time when it is needed most? And, what will that look like? And I'm not trying to hang you out there to say, please keep going, but please keep going and we need you. But how do you start when dollars get short and cuts come, how do you decide where to engage?
Let me just say, we are committed to continuing to work with this region, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, in this area. One of my colleagues, Eric Ford, is now chairing the State Commission for the Department of Juvenile Services because of the work we do with the Choice Program and first-time offenders. We're doing more now than ever. I'm working collaboratively with the Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services. Similarly with the K through 12, we know we have to be working with K through 12 in this environment to figure out ways of supporting teachers and those children. So when there's a will, there's a way. And I think for all of our campuses, we have made this kind of commitment. It's that we are going to continue to do this stuff. We'll do it. We will do it.
No, I absolutely agree with what Freeman said. I also think that all of us, as well as the chancellor, has provided leadership, and we are going to be on the other side of this. It might not be in 2 months, it might be in 6 months, it could be in 8 months. But the fact of the matter is the investments that we've made in relationship building infrastructure to be able to have those types of community relationships, well, they're ones we want to maintain. We want to make sure that we don't lose the progress that we've made. So we're deeply committed to be able to maintaining those relationships and serve the mission that we have as anchor institutions.
So what COVID-19 has revealed is that there are huge disparities with regard to economics, education, all of those things. And so here's what we are taking away from this with regard to Morgan's role as an anchor institution. We are the only public doctoral research comprehensive university in the city of Baltimore. We have a School of Community Health and Policy, School of Engineering, School of Social Work, School of Education and Urban Studies. We have the schools at Morgan now that are ideally poised to even come to the table with more evidence-based research that will lend itself to great public policy, community renewal, and all of those things that are absolutely essential for the long-term sustainability of the redevelopment of our city. And so I believe Freeman has heard me say something like this because, Brooke, I articulated this in the legislature last year. We're in the middle right now of jumpstarting our next strategic plan. I've just concluded my 10th year at Morgan. We had a 10-year plan, and now we're about to do the next one. And so what COVID-19 is saying to us now is that you need to have not 150 priorities, but we only have 5 in our current plan. You need to have 3 as this anchor institution. One is you need to double down on student success, everything that comes with that. And we have seen so much progress at Morgan in graduation rates and retention rates. We've got 5 national awards in this space, and we will double down on that. The next is our research status has been elevated. And so now we are a Research 2 institution, but we aspire to be Research 1, just as College Park, with a different mission. And that mission is, we're raising our hands as high as the sky, and we're saying we are in Baltimore City, we are right smack dab, vernacularly speaking, in the city, in Northeast Baltimore. And vernacularly speaking as well, we ain't going nowhere. And so as a result, it is time for the state, for private philanthropy, to invest in Morgan and elevate us to R1 status with the urban agenda clearly in front of us. And the last is, we're not going to do any of that and leave our neighborhoods and the city behind. All of this is being done in order for the city to be all that it can be.
Right.
Morgan wants to be to Baltimore City in terms of anchor, what Georgia State is to Atlanta, what Temple is to Philadelphia, what the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee is to Milwaukee. So you name any city that I've named, it has a well-defined urban research institution that is producing top-notch research to help that city solve its problems. And that's where I see this as well. You read my bio, so well, you got 2 degrees from Harvard. Morgan has absolutely no desire to be Harvard. We have no desire, and I can go down the list, we have a desire to be a unique Morgan in service to our region.
Well,
Can I get a quick word in on this?
Too. Yes, yes.
My colleagues have said it. It's a matter of priorities, and continuing to do our work as anchor institutions has to be a priority, because we haven't touched on the other issue that we're dealing with in society right now, the matter of structural racism and inequity. And we wouldn't be doing what we're doing, all 4 of us and our colleagues, if we didn't believe that education was a core part of the solution. So what Freeman does at Lakeland, or Kim does in Cherry Hill, David's contributions in Northeast Baltimore, UMB's contributions to schools in West Baltimore to close this gap so that minorities can get to our institutions well prepared and take off from there. We're not going to give up on that.
Yep. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate, the emphasis really that all of you, I think all of you started off in your opening comments talking about the number of first-generation students that you educate. Many of those students are, of course, people of color and students of color, and from this region. And so I'm glad, it's heartening to see all of the work that you do. It's such an important driver in the Baltimore region and around Maryland, the work that you do. We'll close, I think, with one, or there's a final question in the chat that was just sent to me. With more virtual learning happening across all education levels, how steps to bridge the gap between those who may have extra resources, time, space, and skills, to those who have more needs during the pandemic? And I think there was an excellent Planet Money a few months ago about a student who'd been a straight A student, and then she got home, she was at home learning, and, at home, she was helping her parents with the kids. She had to take on a part-time job. There were a lot of things to help make sure that she could be contributing. How can institutions look out for those students, be connected to the students, find out what's wrong? And what was interesting is one of her professors, who had known her very well, had no idea that this was her reality at home, and so was very concerned when she didn't turn in assignments on time, and had to sort of do a little sleuthing to figure out what was going on to then be able to provide support. But, partnership opportunities for graduates who may have trouble finding jobs, I'm just curious what structured ways, or are there structured ways that you are thinking about changing the services that you offer to students?
All of us can tell you about our process for identifying students who are having problems, whether it's not having a hotspot, needing a computer, loaning computers, the MiFi, the enhancement of Wi-Fi in different areas. We're all doing those kinds of things, as we should be doing. Similarly, when you think about financial aid, finding ways to give even more financial support to people, finding jobs for people. And right now, the system and the state, both public and private institutions, had a combined career services consortium back in June. And they had large numbers of companies for students to find internships and jobs. And the vast majority of people did find internships. So there's a special sensitivity to this disparity that we face. And all of us are committed to making a difference.
I might point out that even when we had again, to use the common word, pivot quickly in March and April, we realized quickly that our students remotely needed mental health services. And we addressed that, and of course, we'll continue to address it. We can provide those services remotely. We can't forget about them.
I want to just emphasize what Jay offered. We all are aware of the fact that the pandemic is going to have significant and has had significant effect on mental health, both in the general population as well as with our students that are on campus or at home learning. Their families are struggling in many cases. They're struggling in many cases. So this just really highlights the fact that we have those issues that our students are having to manage through. It's an area, as Jay pointed out, that we've really committed to in terms of providing additional counseling to the students via Zoom, via telephone calls, to be able to set up banks where they can be able to talk to social workers, they can be able to talk to psychologists, they can be able to talk to, in many cases, peer counselors. Oftentimes when the anxiety level's there, to be able to talk to a peer counselor is a first step to be able to do that. We've just made a tremendous amount of work in terms of making this a priority. And the unsung heroes, and I think we'll all agree with this in terms of what we've looked at with the return to campus, has been the student affairs professionals. We often talk about the faculty and the preparation that the faculty have done to be able to be in the classroom, and it's been outstanding. But the student affairs professionals who are working with our students in the residence halls, orientation of new freshmen, our university health centers, counseling centers, student organizations that are doing virtual events for students, so that kind of engagement that needs to happen when they start their university career happens. It's just been remarkable how our student affairs professionals have just been tireless in terms of the work that they've done.
And so I would actually endorse that as well. We introduced in the cabinet, I know several months ago, an idea where we would take a list of students and just call them in the evening, check in, how you doing? And I had a list of 200. And I would call students in the evening and they would be shocked. This is Dr. Wilson calling? Yes, just checking on you. How are you doing? And so I had one colleague at Morgan who called 800 students. And we were able to get to where Jay and Kim and Freeman just articulated. It was all too clear to us that our students were struggling emotionally, many of them. And then we had to come back to the campus. And so what do we do about it now that we know it? And so I then, even in a climate of parsimonious resources, allocated to the counseling center 2 more professional positions that they're filling right now. And they're doing telecounseling, they're reaching out. And so that's just one example, but as Freeman indicated, we all have examples. And just real quickly, I'm going to make a selfish kind of spiel here, because I've seen something over the last 3 days that it's really warmed my heart. And this is for whatever, the billionaires out there, the multiple billionaires. If you really want to do something to close the racial divide, to really address this issue that we are talking about, invest in the institutions that have that as a part of their DNA. And then you can see some real results. And what I'm hearing from all of us is that, this is not lip service for us. This is really what we do. So for those of you who are out there and you want to make transformational investments, do that. Because we're going to come to the state, as you know, Brooke, and we're going to be asking for more money for financial aid. But if you could have some private dollars that are not as restricted, where you can help students pay their rent, you can help students buy groceries, you can help students do those things that we know if you don't help them, they're not going to be successful.
I appreciate that. Well, I want to be cognizant of everybody's time and just say a huge thank you to all of you. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. I always like to end these with a note of gratitude, and I'd like to thank your teams, Pat Hogan, Candace Dodson-Reed, Katie Maloney, and Robin Gray, for helping to get you all in the room and on time. And so thank you to them. Also, I want to everybody was talking about before today is Congressman John Lewis's memorial in Atlanta. And one of my favorites, he's said many amazing things. One of my favorites is we must be the headlights and not the taillights. And when I think of you all and your institutions, not only are you the headlights in our society, but you are equipping students to be headlights themselves. So I am very grateful for the work that you all do, for joining us today. And I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope
Yes.
alive, Delegate. Keep hope alive.
You too, Mr. President. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.